Have you ever wondered what small misunderstandings might lead to the greatest of tragedies? How the seemingly ordinary can transform into something sinister in the blink of an eye? This story delves into a tight-knit community pulled apart by jealousy and suspicion, leaving scars that never fully heal. Join us as we retrace the events that changed one family forever. But remember, not everything is as it first appears. Before we dive deeper, I want to thank all of you for being here to listen and watch. If you're drawn to mysteries, puzzles, and real-life crime stories, please subscribe to True Crime Atlas. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. Melissa was 39 years old, a woman of quiet determination who tried her best to extend patience and kindness no matter the circumstances. She had stepped into a household that was still finding its footing after a terrible loss. Thomas, her new husband, had lost his first wife to illness only a few years earlier. Feelings were still raw, and while Thomas had fallen in love with Melissa and chosen to remarry, his son, Jason, remained guarded. Nothing about that small suburban house felt entirely settled. Photographs of Thomas's first wife still hung on the walls, staring out into hallways where new life had supposedly begun. Despite all obstacles, Melissa approached her marriage and her role as a stepmother fervently. She believed that love and good intentions would dissolve any tension if she tried hard enough. Each morning, she brewed fresh coffee, humming to herself and preparing for the day, earnest in her hope that every kind gesture would gradually smooth out the jagged edges left over from the family's grieving phase. Of course, she couldn't force acceptance, and Jason never made it easy. He rarely looked her in the eye, seldom spoke to her at length, and showed almost no interest in her efforts to support him. Still, Melissa kept her hopes alive. Jason was 18, caught somewhere between the cusp of adulthood and the weight of recent tragedy. While he might have once been talkative and carefree, the death of his mother had placed a shadow over his spirit. He wore that pain discreetly, only letting it show in his averted gaze and in how he spoke to others with quiet formality. For nearly 2 years, he had refused to let Melissa get close, as though fearful that doing so would betray his mother's memory. Thomas, for his part, was walking a thin line between supporting his new wife and respecting his son's lingering grief. He wanted peace above all else, though peace often proved elusive. He tried to talk to Jason about giving Melissa a chance, reminding Jason that life marches forward, that healing requires an open mind, and that it wasn't disloyal to his mother to accept Melissa's affection. But these words never seemed to reach Jason's heart. Instead, he retreated into after-school jobs, weekend gatherings with his friends, and significantly, his relationship with Lily, his girlfriend of nearly a year. Melissa observed all this from a short distance. She tried to find cracks in Jason's emotional armor, but was met only with stony silence or politely delivered single-word responses. Still, glimmers of optimism broke through in the form of small changes. A tiny smile here, a question about dinner there, moments Melissa clung to as signs of growth. She never guessed how fragile that progress would turn out to be. In the months leading up to Jason's high school graduation, a momentous event that Melissa hoped might bring the family together, a subtle transformation began. Jason started spending a few minutes more around Melissa, as if drawn by her gentler nature. He asked about the best place to apply for scholarships, or what it was like studying far from home, or which dorm arrangement might be the most comfortable. These questions lit up Melissa's face with a hope she hadn't felt in years. Maybe, she thought, the dam was finally breaking. On some afternoons, Melissa waited for Jason to return from school, greeting him with something fresh baked from the oven. He would accept a cookie with a small nod, still distant, but no longer rejecting her presence altogether. She glimpsed a new layer to him. He was bright, eager for the future, maybe even anticipating a fresh start once he left suburban life behind. Melissa tried not to overstep, quietly offering advice and resources when asked, always stopping short of anything that might be seen as meddling. Thomas, although relieved by this turn of events, also found himself battling conflicting emotions. He wanted fatherhood to be straightforward again, but it wasn't easy. Joy for the step forward melded with guilt for moving on from his former wife. That guilt made him question every decision he made, both big and small, surrounding Jason's future. But he allowed himself a sliver of comfort in the fact that Jason and Melissa were forming a small bridge at last. Of course, outside the household dynamic, another factor loomed large: Lily, Jason's girlfriend. She was 17, nearing her own graduation, and everything about her seemed intense. She carried her heart on her sleeve, wearing her emotions almost like a banner. Her eyes glowed with fierce desire for love, validation, and belonging. When she first met Melissa, she displayed a polite cordiality, though she launched curious glances whenever Melissa tried to converse with Jason. Initially, Melissa didn't think much of Lily's watchful eyes. Teenagers, she told herself, were prone to jealousy or suspicion if they didn't quite understand adult relationships. The subtle friction hardly seemed worth pressing. In fact, Lily's presence had given Jason peace and a comforting companion during a difficult time. So Melissa stepped away, letting Jason have the space he wanted with his girlfriend, not wanting to be the nagging stepmother who hovered. But as Jason's relationship with Melissa began to warm, Lily seemed to detect a threat. She made comments under her breath. She started questioning Jason about how many minutes he spent talking to Melissa, or what they discussed. She once confronted him after noticing a text message from Melissa about a scholarship opportunity, demanding to know why he was confiding in her so much. The seed of resentment was planted, and it would grow with startling speed. Rumors circulated through the school hallways, though no one paid much attention at first. Teenagers gossiped about how Lily once slapped Jason's phone out of his hand when she saw Melissa's name pop up on the screen. Others claimed Lily poured through Jason's messages when he wasn't looking, trying to piece together clues of something deeper going on than stepmotherly concern. Of course, most high school gossip fizzles out before it gains traction, but Lily's envy was stubborn, fueled by her fear of abandonment and a deep-rooted insecurity that she was losing Jason's attention. Jason, for his part, seemed oblivious to the weight of Lily's fixation. He found it frustrating at times, yes, but he brushed it off as normal teenage drama. He was on the cusp of adulthood, excited about college visits, forging new social connections, and cherishing his small progress with Melissa. He told Lily that her suspicions were unfounded, that he was simply building a better relationship with his father's wife, hoping to achieve some normalcy in the house. Lily's accusations of overstepping felt surreal and unfair to him. And so, Melissa continued her daily life, cooking dinners, tidying up a house that still felt partially haunted by a missing presence, and trying to manage her husband's complex feelings. She had no idea that lurking beneath the small joys of progress was a rising tension that would soon spiral out of control. The day finally arrived: Jason's graduation. Even though the family was still walking on eggshells, everyone recognized the significance of this milestone. The ceremony was a blur of caps and gowns, heartfelt speeches, and teary-eyed parents proud of their children stepping into adulthood. Melissa beamed from the stands, filming short videos and clapping as Jason crossed the stage. Thomas tucked one of his late wife's photographs in his jacket pocket, silently honoring the son they had raised together. Lily was there too, standing with her own cluster of friends. Her eyes flitted around, landing on Jason, on Melissa, on the swirl of families hugging around them. If there was an uneasy shadow across her face, no one seemed to notice. In that charged atmosphere of excitement, tension was easy to mistake for simple nerves. Later, the family hosted a small gathering in their backyard. Neighbors, extended relatives, and friends drifted in and out, congratulating Jason and feasting on snacks Melissa had prepared. Even Jason, normally reserved, laughed and chatted, briefly letting his guard down. She saw a glimpse of a better future, a future where, perhaps, they could all find peace with one another. As the party wound down, the night took on a sweet sort of calm. The sun had set. Lanterns and string lights cast gentle patterns across the lawn, and the last few guests trickled out with well wishes and yawns. Melissa stayed behind to clean up in the kitchen, rinsing plates and fitting leftovers into plastic containers. Washing dishes gave her time to reflect on the day's success. For once, she felt included in Jason's happiness, hopeful for the bond they might finally forge. She was almost done cleaning when she heard a hesitant knock on the kitchen door. Turning around, she saw Jason standing there with a slight smile. He stepped inside, offering to help dry the remaining dishes. Quietly, they worked side by side, a companionable silence broken by small bits of conversation about the next steps in his life, his acceptance letters, dorm options, major decisions. After they finished, Jason turned to her with something on his mind, and she braced herself for whatever he might say. "Thanks," he said softly. "Thanks for always being nice to me, even when I was, difficult." He gave Melissa a brief, awkward hug, a gesture that felt monumental given how rarely they touched. Melissa's heart swelled, convinced this was the start of genuine acceptance. She had no idea that a pair of watchful eyes had arrived, just in time to witness that innocent hug from outside the window. Lily stood in the dark, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Glowing from the screen, a string of messages confirmed Jason's desire to end their relationship. Details jumped out at her. Jason telling a friend he couldn't keep bending to Lily's jealousy, that he needed space to find his own identity before college. Then there was a short paragraph about how he was beginning to appreciate Melissa's guidance. Lily read these words again and again, her anger and hurt mounting with every passing second. In her car, she wrestled with her emotions, tears streaming down her face. She clutched the steering wheel and stared at the house. It was meant to be a night of celebration, a moment to share Jason's success, but she felt like the outcast. In her mind, the blame for their deteriorating connection lay squarely on Melissa. The stepmother figure had to be whispering in Jason's ear, turning him against Lily. Jealousy inflamed her imagination, painting pictures of betrayal. She grabbed a pocket knife from her car's compartment, an item she claimed she kept for self-defense, and slipped it into her purse. Fueled by heartbreak and rage, Lily made the fateful decision to head to the backyard, determined to confront Jason before he could vanish from her life for good. No one witnessed the precise moment Lily charged across the lawn and found Jason alone. The neighbor's security footage, revealed much later, would only show Lily entering the backyard without invitation. The rest was left to speculation and, eventually, Lily's own confession. What the camera footage did capture was Jason stepping outside to fetch something from a table near the patio. A few seconds later, Lily's figure emerged from the shadows. Minutes ticked by, a silent and deadly confrontation. Jason was heard shouting, "Lily, put that down!" Then an eerie stillness fell over the yard. By the time Thomas, awakened from upstairs by the commotion, managed to get outside, he found his son collapsed in the grass, blood staining his graduation outfit, eyes wide with shock and pain. Lily stood a few feet away, shaking. In a panic, she fled into the darkness. Melissa, who had been inside, came rushing out behind Thomas. The sight that greeted her would be seared into her memory forever. Jason gasping for breath from multiple stab wounds, trying desperately to speak. She knelt beside him, pressing cloth napkins against the bleeding, shouting for help, tears streaming down a face twisted with horror. Over the roar of her own heartbeat, Melissa never heard Lily quietly slip back into the kitchen. Emergency services arrived in what felt like agonizing slow motion, though it was only a few minutes. Jason was raced to the hospital, his family following behind in frantic shock. Amidst the chaos, Lily disappeared, at least on the surface. But before she completely vanished from the scene, Lily executed a plan that she had devised in a burst of desperation. She sneaked into the house and found Jason's phone, which she had rummaged through on multiple prior occasions. She played an old voicemail that Jason had once recorded after a minor dispute with Melissa. In that voicemail, Jason was upset about Melissa's intrusion regarding a personal matter, and his tone was bitter. Lily believed this was enough to paint a narrative that Melissa had motive to harm her stepson. She left this voicemail playing as soon as the police arrived, hooking them with the idea that mother and son had a strained, maybe dangerous, relationship. Then Lily quietly left the device for the authorities to discover. Everything happened so fast that no one, not even Thomas, realized what Lily was doing. By the time paramedics had carried Jason away, the police were listening to the contents of that voicemail. Melissa, in a state of utter panic, seemed cagey and distraught, and thus seeds of suspicion were sown within the investigating officers' minds. Jason's life hung in the balance at the hospital for several hours, but the bleeding proved too severe. In the emergency room, doctors worked feverishly to save him, but his injuries were too extensive. He passed away in the early morning hours, leaving Thomas utterly shattered, and Melissa nearly catatonic with grief. When police began their formal investigation, Lily resurfaced, claiming to have witnessed an altercation between Melissa and Jason. She spun a partial lie. She was there to retrieve something Jason had borrowed, but what she saw was Melissa lunging at Jason with a knife. Lily even played the voicemail for them, the same piece of manipulated evidence. Detectives, seeing that the supposed murder weapon came from inside the house and snagged by Lily in her hurry, found only Melissa's prints. It might have been enough for probable cause. By midday, the gossip storm erupted. Neighbors stood on lawns, craning for a glimpse of what was happening. The media pounced on the story. A stepmother accused of murdering her stepson, motive unknown but seemingly dark. Melissa was arrested that afternoon as the prime suspect, even as her tears still choked her throat. Thomas watched in a daze, not knowing what to think, as he saw his wife crying, protesting her innocence, taken away in cuffs. The small suburban community was thrown into turmoil. Reporters camped outside the family home, clamoring for any scrap of sensational detail. They latched onto the evil stepmother narrative, painting Melissa as a manipulative figure driven by jealousy or greed. Even Thomas, numb with heartbreak, faced a barrage of questions. Could it be that his beloved new wife had murdered his only child? The guilt over not protecting Jason tormented him. The crushing sense of betrayal by Melissa, whether real or imagined, made his mind spin with confusion. Lily, meanwhile, played the role of sympathetic victim. She told her parents, the police, and eventually the news outlets that she was devastated by the loss of Jason. She added bits of manufactured detail to back up her story. How Jason had once confided in her about feeling unsafe around Melissa. How he allegedly argued with her the night of the party. These lies found easy traction in a world hungry for a monstrous villain. Lily wept on camera, garnering public sympathy. Hardly anyone questioned the incongruity of Lily being at the house so late without an invitation, or how the physical evidence truly stacked up. The swirl of rumor quickly overshadowed the facts. In jail, Melissa's sense of reality blurred. She found herself behind cold metal bars, sleeping on a thin mattress, all while reeling from the sudden loss of the boy she had begun to think might finally welcome her into his life. On top of that devastating grief, she confronted the horror of being labeled a murderer. She repeated the truth over and over. She never harmed Jason. She would never raise a hand against him. She was inside the house at the time of the stabbing. But the detectives grilled her with contradictions. How could she be sure? Why did the voicemail say Jason felt threatened? Why were her prints on the knife? She felt the weight of public opinion shifting like a tide against her. And once the media latched onto the story, the court of public opinion served its own verdict. Even inside the jail, whispers circulated among other inmates. Guards gave her wary looks, as though they believed the headlines about a stepmother driven to kill. Thomas visited her once, sitting silently through the glass partition, tears streaking his face. His eyes were hollow. He asked, could you?" Melissa felt the blow of that accusation in her soul. She tried to piece her words together, but her own tears drowned them out. Thomas left, uncertain and broken, leaving Melissa with a conjugal visit cut short. The darkness of uncertainty closed around them both. While Melissa languished in jail and the investigation seemed headed toward incriminating her, a pair of detectives from the Cyber Division decided to comb through the digital evidence more thoroughly. They accessed Jason's phone backups, text messages, and social media logs. Something about Lily's story rang hollow to them, especially when they realized how neatly the voicemail lined up with her accusations. One detective found that the voicemail was recorded so far in the past that it was entirely out of context. He also recovered fragments of a series of text conversations that Jason had recently had with a friend, discussing his intention to break up with Lily. Jason's messages revealed a boy at a crossroads, looking for a fresh start in college and worried that Lily's possessiveness was becoming unhealthy. He also mentioned, quite plainly, that Melissa was nothing like the evil stepmothers from fairy tales. He wrote that she was trying her best to support him, that she reminded him of the warmth he desperately missed but couldn't quite accept after losing his mother. These text messages didn't match Lily's claims of fear and hostility. Moreover, Jason wrote that he was worried Lily might do something crazy if I break up with her. Around the same time, a neighbor came forward with security camera footage from the night of the party. The camera, aimed at the front of the neighbor's property, also captured a partial view of Thomas and Melissa's driveway and side yard. In the footage, Lily's car approached the house late in the evening without being invited, and she was seen exiting alone, heading toward the backyard. More tellingly, the timestamps from the footage contradicted Lily's own claims of when she arrived and what she supposedly witnessed. In one key segment of the video, Lily could be seen stealthily entering the back gate, well before the time she claimed she came to the door to see Jason. This directly challenged the official story she gave, which placed her in the house only after hearing raised voices. If Lily walked in while Jason was already being confronted by Melissa, then why did the video show her waiting in the dark, peering through the window? The logs eventually revealed that right before she stepped onto the property, Lily had been scouring Jason's phone messages, presumably reading the ones that indicated he was about to break up with her. The puzzle pieces began to align in a way that no longer pointed at Melissa. As more digital evidence surfaced, Lily's story started to crumble under scrutiny. The detectives invited her in for a formal interview, expecting her to maintain her composure under questioning. Initially, Lily clung to her original claims. She repeated that she witnessed a heated argument, that Melissa threatened Jason before grabbing a knife. But confronted with the texts from Jason's phone mentioning Lily's unstable behavior, plus her own contradictory arrival times, Lily stammered. The carefully woven tapestry of lies began to unravel. Face to face with proof of her unauthorized entrance to the property, Lily's defenses cracked. She started to stutter, claiming confusion, stress, and heartbreak. She insisted that she hadn't meant to kill Jason, that maybe he was the one threatening her. But the investigators pressed forward, revealing that her fingerprints were also on the knife, left behind, in part, because of a clumsy attempt to smear them away. They pointed to footage showing her sneaking around. In that moment, Lily's mask fell completely. Tears mixed with anger, and Lily lashed out, accusing everyone, Melissa, the police, even Jason, of betraying her. Slowly, her words coalesced into a confession of sorts. She described the confrontation, how she felt her entire world was collapsing, and lashed out with the knife. She admitted to setting up Melissa, playing the voicemail as a piece of staged evidence. She broke down, finally facing the weight of her actions. The confession changed everything. Melissa's name cleared almost instantly once Lily's statement was verified, and enough physical and digital evidence aligned to paint the real picture of what happened. The district attorney's office moved quickly to drop charges against Melissa. For 3 long weeks, Melissa had languished behind bars, her life in fragments. When the jail doors finally opened for her release, she emerged blinking into the daylight, still reeling from a nightmare that felt scarcely real. Thomas waited outside, his face a complicated blend of relief, guilt, and sorrow. In his arms, he held the same old photograph of Jason's mother he had carried at graduation. Melissa's release wasn't a time for celebration, though, so much as a moment of abrupt, sobering clarity. Their son was gone, lost to a tragic act of unhinged jealousy, and the entire family had been torn asunder in the process. Who could salvage joy from that? The media soon broadcast Lily's confession, turning the narrative on its head. Sensational headlines pivoted from "Wicked Stepmother" to "Deadly Girlfriend's Jealous Rage." Some outlets offered halting apologies, but the damage was done. Melissa's reputation had been viciously maligned, her every action scrutinized by a bloodthirsty public. No headline or retraction could erase the trauma she had endured. In the weeks following her release, Melissa tried to pick up the pieces of her life. But the toll of those events weighed heavily. Neighbors who once greeted her with warm smiles now offered uncomfortable nods, aware of how wrongly they had judged her. Friends who hadn't bothered to check in after her arrest tried to reach out, but Melissa found it difficult to welcome them back with open arms. The betrayal of public opinion still cut deep. Thomas moved through the house like a ghost. Grief smothered him, leaving his eyes bloodshot and his voice dull. Conversations between him and Melissa grew strained. He harbored a crushing guilt for not believing her, for letting even a shred of doubt slip into his mind. Melissa, on the other hand, realized that the bond they had once shared was irreparably fractured. She couldn't forget or forgive the moment when Thomas had looked at her through the prison glass and asked, "Could you have done this?" Their marriage buckled under the weight of unspoken blame, sorrow, and regret. They fought less than they simply existed, each day more distant than the last. When they did speak, it was usually about funeral arrangements or the swirl of legal issues, hollow words that barely filled the silence between them. Eventually, they decided it was best to go their separate ways, the fracturing too severe to mend. When Lily's day in court finally arrived, the prosecution laid out its damning evidence in meticulous detail. Jason's text messages illustrated how he was planning to break up with her, a fact that corresponded with her escalating jealousy. The neighbor's camera footage showed Lily entering the property uninvited. Then came the forensic revelations. Her fingerprints on the knife, the blood spatter consistent with a close-range attack, the attempts to wipe away incriminating traces. Lastly, her recorded confession sealed the case. The only unknown was whether the jury might be influenced by her youth or any claims of mental instability. In a dramatic courtroom moment, Lily tearfully took the stand. She spoke of heartbreak, of feeling judged and abandoned, of losing control in a fit of rage. While some listeners felt pangs of sympathy, the gravity of her actions left little room for leniency. The judge delivered a severe sentence, 38 years in prison. Lily's outburst sobbed through the courtroom when she realized she wouldn't see freedom for most of her adult life. Many in the community, still grappling with how quickly they had vilified Melissa, found the sentencing a hollow victory. Their relief that justice was served mixed with regret, guilt, and a sense of communal shame that they had so eagerly pointed fingers at the wrong person. Even as the court case closed and Lily began her sentence, the aftershocks of that terrible night reverberated through the community. Thomas sold the house, unable to endure the painful memories that lurked in every corner. Melissa left quietly, choosing to move back to her hometown a few states away. She needed solitude and a chance to rediscover her identity, once so tied to a family that was no more. The local news replaced coverage of Jason's murder with other tragedies, as media cycles do. The sensational headlines faded, replaced by updated stories of stolen cars or new housing developments or broader national affairs. Still, those who had been closely involved remembered. They remembered the heartbreak, the betrayal, the tragedy of a young man robbed of his future by misunderstandings and jealousy. They remembered how swiftly they had condemned someone based on incomplete evidence. For Melissa, healing was slow and uncertain. She sometimes woke in the night, haunted by nightmares of police handcuffs and the bright glare of camera flashes outside her door. Yet she also carried a measure of bittersweet comfort in knowing that for a few fleeting moments, Jason had thanked her and offered her a hug, proof that she had finally broken through his defenses. No one could take that memory away. Early on, Melissa found it near impossible to step foot in the old neighborhood. She would recall the place where she had tried to forge a family, a well-kept front yard shaded by apple trees, a living room with pictures of Thomas's deceased wife, and the backyard where party lights once gleamed. These memories were thick with sorrow. She missed the routine, setting the dinner table, waiting for Thomas and Jason to come home, hearing them shuffle in, dropping coats and exchanging glances. But a sense of betrayal from that place was just as strong. Suddenly, the door to that life had slammed shut, and she had been left to carry on alone. A few times, she visited Jason's grave. He was laid to rest next to his mother, a small plaque with his name and the words, "Forever Loved," etched in the granite. Melissa would place a small bouquet of white lilies there, ironically sharing the name of the girl who had taken his life. She would stand silently, perhaps murmuring a quiet apology for not seeing Lily's instability sooner, or for not doing more to protect Jason, even though she knew it wasn't her fault. Guilt has a peculiar way of finding a home in the hearts of the innocent. Despite the weight of all this, Melissa persisted in rebuilding. She managed to go back to school part-time, earning a certificate in counseling, focusing on grief support. She never claimed to have all the answers. Far from it, but she had walked through a harrowing darkness and felt compelled to help others navigate their own. Eventually, she became a volunteer counselor at a community center, specialized in supporting families who had lost loved ones to violence or accidents. She shared her empathy and listening ear, never revealing the full scope of her past, unless it was truly relevant to help someone else feel less alone in their pain. Thomas ended up remarrying several years down the line, an act that seemed both shocking and predictable to people who knew his story. He found a woman who had also experienced a deep loss, and they bonded over the shared struggle to find light in the darkness. Melissa sent them a simple wedding card with no return address, wishing them well. She hoped it brought him some form of closure or peace, but she didn't dwell on it. That chapter of her life was closed. Still, Melissa's biggest personal challenge was making peace with the fact that she never truly got to know Jason as an adult. Their connection was just forming when it was taken away. She grappled with the question of, what if? What if Lily hadn't let jealousy turn into violence? What if she and Jason had formed a deeper bond? What if that one fleeting hug could have turned into years of motherly love and acceptance? That question haunted her, and perhaps always would. Over time, the sorrow eased, replaced by a softer ache, a reminder of how important it is to seek the truth rather than leap to conclusions. In that way, the final note of this story is not about a sensational trial or a dramatic confrontation in a courtroom. It's about the slow, unsteady process of making sense of tragedy, the unwavering just demands for truth, and the quiet resilience of those who manage to find a path forward. It's a testament to how a single horrible event can alter destinies, yes, but also how redemption can follow in small acts of compassion, in daily efforts to help others who face their own dark nights. Melissa today is not just a victim or a survivor. She's the living embodiment of what it means to carry on after an unimaginable betrayal, by a young woman's jealous hand, by a police investigation hungry for an easy suspect, by a community all too ready to believe the worst. Those experiences allowed her to develop a unique empathy. In that empathy, she found new purpose. And while the scars remain, she presses forward, determined not to let one night of violence define the rest of her days. If there is a truth to glean from this tragedy, it's this: that destructive misunderstandings can hide in plain sight. That heartbreak, when left unchecked, can become rage. That ignoring the quiet warnings of mental distress can set off a devastating chain of events. And above all, that the pursuit of truth must be thorough and fair, because a rush to judgment can destroy the innocent. Thank you again for staying with us through this extensive, cautionary tale. A true crime story that reminds us how quickly love can curdle into something dangerous, and how easily, in the heat of confusion, the wrong person can be branded as the villain. We appreciate your time, your attention, and your willingness to confront the hard truths of human nature. If you would like to hear more stories that peel back the layers of circumstance, motive, and heartbreak, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Atlas. We have many more cases to explore, each a testament to the frailties and fortitudes of the human condition. Stay curious and stay compassionate.